Hi guys, my name is Matthew Ireland,
Hi, I'm Allison Kung.
I'm Doug Thompson.
and our project is going to be on no-cost baseline concussion testing. So concussions are very important. The CDC states that almost 500,000 kids are treated in the ER due to concussions or brain injuries each year. And in addition, the CDC quotes a study that talks about that 15% of students reported having at least one concussion related to sports physical activity. So you can see it's a pretty prevalent thing in like high school sports, and that is something that we really need to be on top of because it can have long-term effects on the people. And these long-term effects that I was talking about are possible headaches, dizziness, fatigue, irritability, anxiety, insomnia, loss of concentration and memory, ringing in ears, blurry vision, noise and light sensitivity. And you can think that if kids are having with this, it's going to affect their schoolwork, it's going to affect their play. And we all know that students probably aren't going to want to come out because they often, as we're going to see in the future slides, that it's often unreported. Okay. So another important thing is that concussions have been linked to CTE, which is chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and it's a progressive degenerative disease affecting people who have suffered repeated concussions and TBIs. And it may occur in some athletes who have been exposed to repetitive concussions. So basically, if you've had repetitive head trauma and you've had repetitive concussions that haven't been treated, then you might be at higher risk for getting CTE, as we've seen with a lot of NFL retired football players who have been diagnosed with the condition. It's an ongoing issue as we're getting more and more recognition. I don't think it's a new thing. I think it's just that we're starting to understand what exactly is happening. And then a study from 2015 stated that that experiencing many concussions over your lifetime increases your chance of getting CTE. So they were showing a correlation between the number of concussions or the number of traumas that the person received and the chances that that person was going to get CTE. And they didn't have to be concussions. They could have just been subconcussive injuries, which are just like little hits, like nothing that you would be like, whoa, and they'd have to walk off the field, but something that you wouldn't really probably notice that much in a sport full of activity and violence. Okay. And then.
So the population that we're going to be helping out with, as you can read for yourself, is going to be underprivileged high school athletes. There's a problem just in Southern California and America in general that underprivileged schools typically aren't getting the necessary access to athletic trainers and skilled professionals to help identify and protect them from these types of injuries. So what we're going to do is go into a couple lower privileged schools and run the baseline testing and give that information back to their coaches and their school staff. So this way they have that information and they know what to test for in the future. So the test we're going to be running with the kids is going to be the SCAT-5, which is the Sports Concussion Assessment Tool. And it's the 5th edition. You can see kind of through the headline that it's been supported by FIFA, the Olympics, and a couple other professional organizations. It's a very broad, very inclusive test to help prevent and recognize signs and symptoms of concussion. So to go through it a little bit, so a couple big things that you have an immediate on-field assessment, which is what this page is showing. The biggest thing, step 1, is red flags, and it's going to be stuff like neck pain, double vision, weakness, tingling in the extremities. These are your immediately call the hospital, call 911, get these kids off the field and have them stop doing their performance. We also have some observable signs, and there's also a box too for coaches or whoever the professional is, whether they witnessed it or they saw it on film. I'm not going to read through everything with you, but there are different signs and symptoms there that you can check off. There's a memory assessment too for students. So it's going to be stuff like, where are you at? What are you doing here? What was the last game that we played? And stuff like that. There's the Glasgow Coma Scale on here as well. For us, we should remember the majority of the Glasgow Coma Scale just to run through with students to make sure that they're cognitive and they're present to where they are in the moment. and then a quick C-spine assessment, just covering all the quick bases for students on the field immediately. There is also an in-clinic version of it, which is the start of this. So this is a little bit more in depth. It's going to be more student background. So that's what step one is, just getting a bunch of background information on the student, everything from like where they're going to school, their age, gender, etc. And then it's going in a little bit more of like history, if they have any underlying conditions to go along with the concussion, such as ADHD, dyslexia, if they've had any previous head injuries or hospitalizations from head injuries. And then after that, the next two is just your symptom check. And we're literally going to have them just go through. We'll just ask them scale of 1 to 10, 1 to 6, and have them rate basically where they are at the moment. So now this, you can either set this up for a baseline, which should be zeros or ones along for the most part. And then you'll have a post-injury one. And the big thing you're looking for comparing baseline to post-injury is just changes in those. Then we also have some orientation stuff, just making sure that students know where they're at, test their memory. There's a bunch of different tests that you can run, from repeating digits backwards, months in reverse. Just go through and pick the different categories that you need, fill out through, and have the student recall, and then you score them based on that.
Okay. And in addition to us doing the baseline testing for these underprivileged high school athletes, we also want to bring to your attention some things to consider. So you might know about how there's a lot of equipment out there. For example, from football, you've got helmets. From soccer, you've got some headgear like this that we'll go over later. And there's even these new equipments that are coming out, such as a collar that you can wear around your neck. So something that we want to just bring to your attention and for you to keep in mind is that though all of these equipment are used to reduce the impact of how hard your kid, or how hard an athlete would be hitting their head, they don't work to prevent these concussions. So there can still be damage to their head. Additionally, in according to what Matthew was saying, researchers say that there are multiple small hits to the head can actually be worse for the brain compared to a single larger hit. And that kind of connects to the CTE slide that Matthew was talking about. So on the next slide, we'll go ahead and we'll kind of just go into some detail about the different devices. So the newest, or one of the newest technologies for concussions, is called the Q collar. So the Q collar, if you look over to the right, it's kind of like this green neck device, and there's like a black outing on the edge over there. So how this works is that we can actually jump down to the picture right below it. So what you do is you wear this Q collar around an athlete's neck. And what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to increase the blood flow to the muscles surrounding the brain to help decrease the amount of impact. So that goes with the picture on the right. And this is supposed to be more effective than a helmet, because the helmet is not kind of making those structures in your head bigger, so the brain is able to jumble around the brain a little bit more. That's kind of the idea about it. This is something that has reviewed, that has journal and research behind it, but it's still pretty new in the game and it can be quite pricey. Other things, for example, are headgear and helmets. So in football, we see that, football players wear a lot of helmets to help with some of the impact. And there's been new and more upcoming technology on that. And that's more things to look into. On the soccer aspect of it and other head sports, there's stuff like headgear. So this is an example of a headgear. This is one that a lot of soccer players use. It's called Full 90. And what you do is that you wear it on top of your head like this, and it kind of covers the front part of your forehead. And this is great and all because it, helps with some of the impact. But at the end of the day, like I said in the beginning slide or the slide before this, it's not going to prevent a concussion. And even though you can add more cushion or headgear to all of these devices, then you have to think about how it compromises the athlete's game and the athlete's vision, because it can get in the way. So these are just some things to consider as there's going to be new technology out there and people advertising. So you keep into account whether or not it's really worth it. All right, so that's our presentation today. Thanks for listening.
Yep.